In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Hope was ratioed a very long time ago in this universe, filled to the brim with xenos and demonic threats that threaten mankind across the galaxy. When people think of the term grimdark, Warhammer 40k usually comes to mind, and for good reason. You have a city that is impossibly large, filled with pain and despair unimaginable, a system so terrible that a galaxy-consuming, life-absorbing race of aliens outright kill people instead of consuming them in their DNA. Mankind quite literally travels through the equivalent of hell to cross space and time, and some never return from the warp itself. Endless fighting and destruction define the setting of Warhammer 40k, where dying quickly may seem like a mercy, but for the tabletop community and fans of the games released on various platforms, it is a bastion of nerdgasm, filled with some of the richest world building and lore that you can find in a sci-fi setting. My personal experience started from the Dawn of War series, back when I was more into real-time strategy games. I haven't played the genre for quite a while, but my fascination with Warhammer 40k never changed. In that time between the prime years of Dawn of War and now, we've had a gigantic sea worth of Warhammer 40k titles of different genres. But since diving into the boomer shooter genre since Doom 2016, the idea for an old school inspired FPS set in the Warhammer 40k universe would be perfect, since it already had a rich setting to sit on, while it focuses on the simple and straight to the point gameplay that boomer shooter fans want. Some titles would try to make a go at making a Warhammer 40k FPS, but they opted for different flavors of FPS that might not have scratched that 90s fast-paced itch that is commonly satiated nowadays in boomer shooters. Well, not only does the Emperor protect, but he also provides for the faithful, because we have not only a fun and satisfying old school inspired shooter, but one that the Codex Astartes approves of, and that game is Warhammer 40k Boltgun. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is the marriage between the straight-to-the-point structure of Doom 1 and 2, combined with the grimdark setting of Warhammer 40k. Boltgun was also the result of the rising boomer shooter trend that provides a blend of old-school game design and modern controls. In this genre of FPS, the story takes a backseat and gameplay becomes the driver behind the wheel. A lot of boomer shooters have gameplay as the focus, while story is treated as an afterthought and not something that's considered important. Although, some exceptions would come out of the woodwork. Games like Ultrakill, as well as Horde, Supplice, or Diluvian Ultra. These sort of games would be the exceptions, but not necessarily the norm in the genre. Nevertheless, Warhammer 40k Boltgun benefits from the pre-existing set piece of what it's based on, meaning that as long as the story crafted was lore accurate and didn't contradict anything related from Space Marine 1 or Warhammer 40k itself, they could then create an original story for Boltgun. So, Boltgun is not only a retro-inspired shooter, but is also a game that is connected to Warhammer 40k Space Marine, a third-person shooter that had you fighting orcs, as well as chaos forces on the planet Graia, a forge world that was of vital importance to the Imperium, and the events from that game somewhat carry over to Boltgun. However, you're not playing as Captain Titus, but Malam Kaido, a firstborn Sternguard veteran who is also part of the Ultramarines chapter. Malam Kaido is sent by the Inquisition back to Graia to investigate disturbing activity related to what happened several standard years ago in Space Marine 1. The Ultramarines would then be sent down to purge any remaining heresy in the system, as well as any possible retrieval of any vital information, as well as retrieving the power source linked with the invasion of the Forge world. Of course though, not everything went to plan, since Malam Kaido, your character would be the sole survivor after planetfall, and now, in the Emperor's will, you will be booming and shooting your way through the Chaos Hordes in old school pixelated glory. To start off with, the setting of this game is already amazing. The mix of sci-fi and medieval gothic architecture, the blend of religion and fanaticism carved into sculptures, armor, weaponry, as well as the technology itself, will either make the Xeno or demonic filth twitch with anger or terror, or make the faithful man or woman strengthened by the Emperor's guidance. As Malam Kaido, your honor is your life. Your duty is your fate. Your fear is to fail. Your salvation is your reward. Your craft is death. And your pledge is eternal service. Warhammer 40k is simply the perfect setting for this genre of shooters. Nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, comes close to it. With the near infinite well of lore and world building on top of the various factions and races that exist in the grimdark melting pot, you have everything you need to build an awesome boomer shooter out of. But does Boltgun do enough? Well, it depends. Your enjoyment of this game will boil down to your expectations and your experiences from previous boomer shooters. Since there are so many nowadays, you now have to dig even deeper for more specific flavors and preferences. For example, people that loved Ultra Kill started looking towards what some call movement shooters. They are fast-paced shooters with a lot more verticality and advanced movement mechanics that provide an expression of free movement and not just turning your brain off and shooting what's in front of you. Echo Point Nova is a great example of a movement shooter because it provides all of the space needed for the eagle to fly free and provides an experience for someone who confuses crack for Titanfall 2. Others who want something old school but tactical may look at the Citadel games, where a more methodical reloading system is used, on top of taking the game slower, peeking around corners and analysing the room may be something more of your tempo. However, if you just want something that is Doom 1 and 2 but with a different coat of paint, with more refined gameplay mechanics, then Boltgun will have you covered there. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is a ton of fun, and the fun factor can also be enhanced if you're already deep into the lore and history of Warhammer 40k. If you've already played Doom 1 and 2, then you pretty much already know how to play Boltgun. The rest just comes down to some adjustment to the feeling of movement, the use of the weapons, as well as recognizing what threats take priority. Some of the shooters I've covered in the past I've had to say the same thing because they generally follow the structure to a T. In some of the boomer shooters, including Doom 1 and 2, I can overlook the repetitiveness of finding keys and secrets because the gameplay is simple but a lot of fun. And that's the thing that some other boomer shooters sometimes lack. The same feeling of fun or satisfaction, which, to be fair, is hard to identify because what can feel fun or hit right for someone will be different to someone else's preferences. Warhammer 40k Boltgun nails the attitude of the Space Marine, having loyalty to his brothers in arms, faith in his Emperor, and eternal hatred for traitors and Xeno scum. Not only do I feel this, but I also hear it too. You could quite literally taunt your enemies and yell out to the sky of your wrath and your undying faith.
My shield is disgust. The blood of martyrs is the seed of the Imperium. For Ultramar! A son of Gilliman knows only war. For the throne! I am proud to serve and proud to die. I will purge them for the Imperium.
It's not just a mission of ripping and tearing anymore at this point. It is a crusade. In Boltgun, the main enemies are the forces of chaos, and they form in different shapes and sizes. You have the various cultists wielding bolters, shotguns, and plasma rifles. Then you have your traitor brothers with different classes that are tanky and can be outright infuriating like the aspiring champions, and God help you if you don't completely gib them, for they will become chosen champions where your health will be gone on higher difficulties if you let them even nudge you. The rest are more manageable, even the Terminators, because you can just wait for them to reload and then dump rounds into them. The rest are just demonic filth from the Chaos Gods, such as Nurgle and Tzeentch. In between the roster, you'll also have some bigger enemies to deal with that also act like bosses, which are also separated by a number next to their health pool, and the enemies also have the same mechanic. The higher the number, the more difficult the enemy, and the opposite is true when the number is lower. Throughout the levels, you will be fighting them in droves, and that number can be expanded based on the difficulty you select. For first time players, I would recommend medium difficulty, also known as My Armor is Contempt. But if you've already got a ton of experience in other shooters, then it would start with the Emperor's Mercy difficulty, or Exterminatus if you want the hardest challenge. But even on the medium difficulty, the game's challenge can spike very quickly. You'll be thrown into some rooms you'll have to purge, which can be showered with nothing but enemies and projectiles, creating literal chaos in the flow of combat that can also make some sections more frustrating than fun. The purge fights as well as the bosses are generally the hardest parts of Boltgun, and could be the deal breaker for some that feel that it's too much. But there are a few things to take into consideration that are also there for your benefit. For starters, identifying the strengths and weaknesses of enemies coupled with the weapon of choice is important to clearing arenas more efficiently. You also have power-ups in the arenas to give you an edge in the fight if you can find them, and machine spirits can upgrade your weapon to be even more useful. The machine spirit affects each gun differently, but they can be absolute lifesavers on the hardest difficulties. Some weapons won't do much on bigger targets, but the more powerful weapons like the melter gun or the grav cannon absolutely will. As for the weapons themselves, they're a lot of fun to use, and there may also be some weapon tech to be discovered. One notable trick that I found is the shotgun swap, where you fire a shotgun, switch to the bolter, and then back to the shotgun. Doing this will cancel the pump animation and allow you to fire the next round even faster, which can make for some great damage output on the tougher enemies. However, they don't quite have the same punchy sounds I found in other games. Not enough bass or treble in between the shots that made me feel like I fired something powerful. When I fire a shotgun, I want the whole world to hear it. I want to hear that thump in my chest every time I hear a powerful sound, and personally, I'm not really getting it here. In saying that, the weapons and their functions are a ton of fun to use, which just makes the gameplay better. Having fun weapons makes for fun gameplay after all. Just don't fire the plasma gun up close. Just don't. Other than your main arsenal, you'll also have the chainsword, which can be used to tear enemies apart and can also be used to deliver final blows to those traitors who aspire to be a champion. But with much tougher enemies, you need to be careful with it, since you can still take damage while in the middle of carving your chainsword through demonic filth or traitorous heretics, so use it wisely. What you also have are quick saves, which can really help in the hairiest of fights, which consequently does make it easier than some of the other boomer shooters that don't have it. In saying that though, some of the enemies can be very annoying to deal with, which makes some of those features quite useful to have. Toads are annoying, do considerable damage, they're coarse, they're warm, and they get everywhere. Aspiring champions catch up very quickly and do insane amounts of damage, even on medium. When you fight them, make sure that you don't stop shooting after their health is completely dropped, because if you leave them ungibbed, they can become chosen champions, which forces you to fight them again. The enemy roster overall is pretty decent, but there is definitely room for more, since Chaos has a huge roster that the studio can play around with. Now, since replaying this game as well as working on the video, I discovered that there was an announcement for Boltgun 2, where they may just be doing the things that I just said about the enemy roster, where we have a lot more enemies to fight with, where we may also be able to fight those who serve the Skull Throne, which I'm looking forward to. But as it stands with Boltgun 1, it's like Doom 1 in this respect, where the start is promising, but the cravings for more are deeper than what the game provides. With the movement and gameplay in general, it's really solid and at times a lot of fun. The footsteps you make are powerful, and Space Marine armor commands a powerful presence that is matched by the attitude and the slamming of the ground with your feet. You're not hiding or running, but are fighting for the God Emperor of mankind, and your footsteps reflect that too. You don't want to be hidden, you want to be heard. And that is a powerful thing to have when you're a Space Marine. You have a pretty generous jump as well that can get you fairly far, as well as a charge mechanic that can kill fodder up close, as well as give you an extra nudge that is needed for greater distances, which can also be useful for finding secrets. Even though you're a hulking Space Marine, you feel fast, and since the gameplay is fast, your movement syncs pretty well here. It's like a more polished version of Doom 1 and 2, but with more verticality added into it thanks to having more complex geometry and terrain to work with, on top of just the modern controls, which makes it easier to play, and that's really just it. Boltgun is just Doom 1 and 2 with a Warhammer 40K skin on top of it, but with more modern controls and a more modern UI on top of it. At the same time, it also plays it too safe with the formula where it doesn't really do much or anything at all to go further beyond that formula. You see, when you've played a bunch of old school shooters or boomer shooters as of late, you can generally tell what kind of game it's going to be by just looking at it. With Warhammer 40K Boltgun, it's again just Doom 1 and 2. You go through each area of the level, killing enemies, finding keys and secrets, and eventually the exit. This pattern of progression never really changes across each of the chapters, where each level is already pretty lengthy. So if you're already feeling some fatigue from Doom 1 or 2 or other shooters like them, then Boltgun will only reinforce the fatigue unless you're really in the mood for some Warhammer 40k action. Each level does offer some variety in the environments, but it ultimately just blends together anyways, giving off some of those sci-fi medieval gothic architecture that Warhammer 40k has quite a lot of. It does get a bit repetitive as you go along, and there are times where I reach a state of catatonia where I'm more focused on shooting heretics than taking in the scenery, and the lack of a map makes it even more annoying to hunt for secrets. Most of the boomer shooters I've played has a map, even the more basic ones. It's 40,000 years into the future, and there is no excuse to not have a map. Even Kingsfield 1 has a map, and that game is only 29 megabytes and came out in 94. I sincerely hope Boltgun 2 has a map because it needs it. However, we're not left empty-handed. Boltgun instead has a navigation feature where if you're feeling lost, you can press a button that charts a path to your destination, which helps those who are feeling lost and can also provide an opportunity to explore the current area further before you move on. The game's music is something I didn't take that much notice of. It seems to mostly be industrial music with some metal and electronic mixed into it. Some metal tracks are found in the menu as well, but overall, it's not joining the playlist during my study sessions of the Arcane or the Unknown anytime soon, except for the main menu track, which is actually a track called Turn This Ship Around by D-Rock from the album Oblivion released in 91. Older Warhammer fans will appreciate this nod. In saying this though, I probably just need to give the soundtrack some more time for it to worm its way into my head. I am open-minded to giving it another chance down the track just to see if it clicks or not. For alternative music that would go well with this game, anything from the recent Doom entries, soundtracks by Andrew Holshot, or even anything by the band Bolt Thrower will do just as well if not better for some. On a more positive note, the art style is beautiful. The 40k aesthetics are on point in every department, from the weapons, the objects, the structures, and the enemies. They all have a crunchiness to their sprite work that isn't always there in the boomer shooter scene. And better yet, you can edit the pixelation and palette in the settings if you want the game to look a little bit more modern or more retro. Although, too much pixelation makes it too blurry to see. Not to mention just how much clutter can already spawn in a room during Purge sequences. The gore is there, the retro aesthetics are there, but it doesn't look like shit, and the game runs reasonably well all things considered. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is a very solid boomer shooter that's one of my favourites, primarily due to the awesome setting that it's based on, the Space Marine attitude that matches the brutality of the gameplay, and purging chaos filth is something that will never get boring. Now for those that haven't played Space Marine 1, I would highly recommend playing that one first, because this game does spoil some things from it, since it's in between the events of 1 and 2. Nevertheless, it's a safe, sometimes repetitive and frustrating but fun boomer shooter for fans of that type of shooter, as well as fans of the Warhammer 40k universe. With Boltgun 2, I can only hope that it irons out some of the issues that I've had with this game and just polishes what was already good, but time will tell. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a Tyranid situation that requires my attention in Space Marine 2. Stay safe everyone, and may the Emperor guide your way.